In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. But contrary to what Donald Trump says, we do have the power. Remember, what you just heard from is the most disliked president in our history, whose ratings, whose popularity ratings are as low as any president has ever been.
Jill Stein, Jill Ellen Stein, her middle name is Ellen. She was born May 14th, 1950. She is 67 years of age. She's an American physician, an activist, a politician. She's the Green Party nominee for the 2012 and the 2016 elections, and she also ran for governor of Massachusetts in 2002 and 2010. She was born in Chicago, Illinois, so she's from the Windy City. Her husband is Richard Rower, and she's got 2 kids. She graduated from Harvard University. Now, the Democrats, they'll have you believe that Ralph Nader took it from Al Gore, but they never mentioned Pat Buchanan. Why did Al Gore lose? Well, Pat Buchanan took a couple votes in Florida.
Let's end the war on drugs and the mass incarceration related to that, and then we should be discharging from our prisons the people, the nonviolent drug offenders who should not have been incarcerated in the first place.
It comes to the two-party system, I'm a loyalist, right? You can only vote for the 2 main political parties. But I'm also old school, so I only vote for Whigs and Federalists. I will never vote for a third party. This is a Whig and Federalist America, and it's always going to be a Whig and Federalist America, and it will never change. So the third parties, in fact, every presidential election has had a third party. There has been 3 or more people in every single presidential election. Every single one. Can you name one? Can you tell me one where there wasn't a third party, but people are like, hey, you can't participate. Hey, you shut your mouth. Hey, you quit. In fact, Jill Stein, because she took enough votes away from the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party has a potential to be saved right now. The Democratic Party, your soul is dirty and rotten and corrupt to the core. If you're not a progressive, then why are you a Democrat?
And that is, we also need ranked choice voting, because the politics of fear is used to intimidate voters into voting for the lesser evil. But we've seen over and over again that the lesser evil just paves the way for the greater evil. In many ways, Donald Trump is a symbol of that. Most people who voted for Trump were not voting for him. They were voting against Hillary Clinton, the Democrats, and the legacy of betrayal, of NAFTA, of exporting our jobs, of throwing workers under the bus. People are voting against that, the legacy of both the lesser evil and the greater evil. We need to lead the way forward. We need to be able to go into the polls and vote for what we want.
The other sort of biggest losers throughout history, the two-party system of the candidate that didn't win, who kept running over and over again. You have William Jennings Bryan. He lost 3 presidential campaigns. Henry Clay, he lost 3 presidential campaigns. Henry Clay had the famous quote, "I would rather be right than to be president," and so he was successful in that endeavor.
Not against the candidate we most dislike. Democracy needs a moral compass. We need to be that moral compass. Ranked choice voting allows us to actually bring our values to our vote and to let our vision drive the way forward. Shout out to the state of Maine, which is leading the way. They've passed ranked choice voting as a referendum. They're defending it against the Democrats and Republicans who are trying to repeal it because they want to use fear to intimidate you to stay inside the corporate system, the 2 parties of war and Wall Street that is throwing the American people under the bus. We can create an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. The power to create that world is in our hands.
Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs ran 4 times. Eugene Debs is a socialist, popular socialist, famous for the Pullman strike, which he lost. And he also lost all those presidential elections. but he spoke out against World War I. Woodrow Wilson throws him in jail for the rest of his life. Eventually, he gets pardoned, but right before he dies. So Eugene Debs actually got 1 million votes while he was sitting in jail. So Eugene Debs lost 4 elections, Henry Clay lost 3 elections, and William Jennings Bryan lost 3 elections. And Jill Stein is the reason. The reason why Henry Clay lost, Jill Stein. Why did William Jennings Bryan lost? There was, probably another somebody else was in the race, so that's not fair, right? For someone else to run to think that they could participate in our system. Why did Eugene Debs lose? Jill Stein. Jill Stein is the blame
for the fires in California, not to mention, huge numbers, and I should add the mudslides as well. And these are global phenomena where the lives lost are far. The world is seeing 65 million refugees, largely from wars and from poverty related to U.S. Domination, wars and economic domination and exploitation and colonialism. So, 65 million people were on the move in the last year. That's going to turn to 650 million by the end of the century.
That I want to mention, Jill Stein, when she ran in 2012, she actually took it to a whole nother level. Ralph Nader goes to the debate. He had bought a ticket to be a part of the audience. He was going to sit in the audience, and that was essentially it, right? He wasn't going to disrupt it, just sit. He had a ticket. He paid for the ticket, but he wasn't even allowed to spectate. He wasn't allowed to participate. He wasn't allowed to spectate. He just had no rights. He wasn't a person. He wasn't a citizen. He was a second-class citizen. He's an independent. Nader was agreeing. How dare you think you can get into the debate stage? So that's what the Republicans and Democrats do. They cheat. They cheat in the election. They make sure nobody comes and shows. They can't, without getting into the debates, you don't really have much of a chance. So Jill Stein goes to the debates in 2012, and what did you motherfuckers do? You arrested her. You arrested a middle-aged housewife, a soccer mom, because she wanted to go to the debate.
And they should be, but our protections should not be thrown to the wind here. He talks about FDA approving more generic drugs. Well, he just appointed to the head of Health and Human Services the head of one of the drug companies who has most extremely escalated the cost, the skyrocketing cost of pharmaceuticals. So, all well and good for Donald Trump to promise that he's going to take down the high cost of pharmaceuticals. How are you going to do that when you're appointing as head of Health and Human Services one of the chief architects of the skyrocketing cost of our pharmaceuticals? I think the cost of insulin doubled, if I have my facts correctly here. The cost of insulin doubled under the person, Azar, that he just appointed to Health and Human Services.
I don't understand why it was so important for you motherfuckers to throw Jill Stein in jail. She showed up to the political debates, and she's essentially saying, I'm allowed to debate here. And that's, how big of a badass she is. She did something that wasn't illegal, that is consistent with democracy, but you motherfuckers had to arrest her. You had to arrest her. You didn't just say, send her to jail or whatever, lock her up. You did lock her up. You locked Jill Stein up. Your hatred actually hurt and took away Jill Stein's freedom. So I don't remember Hillary being thrown in jail and humiliated. I don't remember Hillary being, for going to the debates. What the hell are you doing here, Hillary? You're at the debate stage thinking that you're a serious candidate? Get the fuck out of here. Why would anybody waste a vote for Hillary Clinton? She's going to fucking lose. She's not a progressive. She's a right. Well, she'll ruin the Democratic Party forever. They're corrupt. They're dirty. They're warmongers.
Good evening, friends, fellow Americans, and citizens of the planet. Welcome to the Green State of the Union, where we will take stock of what the state of our union really is. And I dare say it is not safe, strong, and proud America. I would say it is an America in revolt, an America that is standing up for justice and for transformation. You might note we didn't hear the word justice mentioned once, nor the word equality, nor poverty, nor peace. What we heard basically was a distressing and dystopian vision of a world at perpetual war and paying an incredible price for that at home. So we'll be talking about the real state of our union and how we take that union forward to create an America and a world that works for all of us, not just for the corporations and the 1% who really are the beneficiaries of the policies that Donald Trump was describing and of the bipartisan agenda.
About the bigotry of independents and the hatred for third parties for raising their hand. Oh, little Jill Stein stuck her little neck out and took some votes away from Michigan and, cost Hillary the state. Good. Hillary wasn't a progressive. If she would have picked a couple, if she would have got UBI, if she would have got one progressive issue, she would have won me over. The universal basic income, she would have won me over with, many fucking issues. But she just could not, champion. She ran to the right every minute, every time. She could not wait to compromise and throw, the progressive base under the bus. So this isn't about Jill Stein or, America's bigotry against little, beautiful, wonderful, the precious revolutionary that is Jill Stein. Isn't she wonderful? God.
Investments. But the tax plan that he just passed is going to slash state and local investments. Those investments depend on state and local revenues and also on municipal bonds, that is the ability of local governments to borrow the money in order to fund these projects. But because of changes worked into the tax cuts, those bonds are going to be very hard to come by. It's going to be very hard for state and local government to be able to put the money down in order to develop these infrastructure improvements. So this is actually, it's a terrible plan, and there's a wonderful investigative report that I should mention on the Real News Network that looks at what the impact of this infrastructure development plan is going to be on water resources. Essentially, it's going to privatize water utilities, both sewage treatment as well as the provision of drinking water. So, we're hearing Donald Trump, the salesman, the snake oil salesman, in his dystopian vision of the future. So, I know you don't need to be convinced that this is not a reliable person that you've just heard from. But I couldn't let pass some of the outrages that he spoke of. And quickly to mention a couple more, he talked about being able to fire federal workers. And I wasn't able to hear all of that just because we had a technical problem with our connection. But this doesn't bode well. This is yet another assault on working people in America.
We're here to talk about the issues. We're here to talk about the policy. We're here to talk about her State of the Union address. So, number one, she mentions that Trump is the most disliked candidate, disliked president ever. He's got the worst numbers, the worst approval rating numbers. Everybody hated him beforehand. And in fact, the unfavorables for both Hillary and Donald were most people voting for both of those candidates weren't voting for their candidates, but voting against the other one. Well, I don't really like Donald, but what am I going to do? Vote for Hillary? Well, I don't really like Hillary, but what am I going to do? Vote for Donald? That was the 2016 election. That's the extent of the analysis. That's dead on. And he is the most disliked president, so that's important to remember. Even though this boosted him up 10 points, it boosted him up to 42% was the highest number I heard. So, great boost, but still the majority of the fucking people dislike this.
Yeah, not a word of it to be believed. He talked about renovating our nuclear weapons. And yes, unfortunately, that was begun by Barack Obama, who called for $1.5 trillion worth of investments. I think what's going on right now in North Korea, where you have North and South Korea getting together to actually begin the process of reconciliation, to begin dialogue, to begin diplomacy. That is the way forward. And they put to shame Donald Trump with his warmongering, with his war drill of pretending or actually enacting.
Voting is one of her biggest issues. Ranked choice voting also shows how the two-party duopoly don't want a fair election. They don't want to include independence in there. They want to cheat. They don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in the people should, of a government of, by, and for the people. They believe in an oligarchy or plutocracy. If you don't believe in democracy, then you must believe in some kind of fucking hierarchy, some other kind of bullshit. Because if, I think we're stuck with democracy being the, least, the best. All governments are the worst. Let's see. Democracy is the worst form of government besides every other government tried before it. So, essentially it's the best government. It's not great. If you have to have a state, then you have to have a democracy. So it's weird that some libertarians would actually be against democracy. They're going to run for office to kill democracy, destroy democracy, make sure you have no say.
Rehearsing the dropping of nuclear bombs on North Korea. That's why North Korea felt driven to develop a nuclear weapons deterrent. And North Korea is a good example of where you get with the kind of warmongering and threatening that Donald Trump has adopted as the basis of his foreign policies and his domestic policies as well, for that matter. And what we see with South Korea, which has basically extended an olive branch, we see them really taking substantive steps forward and beginning to actually discuss how they can get to that place of peace and reconciliation, which should include a peace treaty. The Korean War has never been concluded. We need to stop the war rehearsal and actually establish a cessation of hostilities.
Also talking about ending the war on drugs. I don't remember anybody saying that. Did Hillary say end the war on drugs? No, Hillary didn't even know of marijuana. The research is still out on marijuana. Oh, fucking progressive Hillary. Didn't know if marijuana should be. She was a Goldwater girl. Did you know Hillary was a Goldwater girl? He was against civil rights, but she didn't give a shit. So she talks about ending the war on drugs. She talks about mass incarceration. She talks about how we should pardon those who have been convicted, and that's something Colorado needs to do. The Governor Hickenlooper needs to pardon all the pot everybody that's in jail for pot needs to be pardoned and freed. Everybody's allowed to smoke pot now. There's still people behind bars because of simple possession or drug dealing, marijuana dealing. They sold a fucking joint to their neighbor. Now they're serving a 5-year sentence, and they can't get out. They're not allowed to get out. So she talked about ending the war on drugs, which I didn't hear. The libertarians.
Donald Trump's warmongering has only made matters worse. So it's an example of how these problems, which are described as intractable, actually are not intractable. They can be solved. His intention to reopen Guantanamo, which has been reduced, the numbers of prisoners have been reduced, but to sort of reestablish it, is absolutely outrageous and plays right into the playbook of terrorist groups that want to point to the human rights abuses, the outrages, the torture being conducted by the United States, which is a wonderful way for our adversaries to build support and to recruit more people to their ranks. So this is exactly the wrong things to be done. Likewise, the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, which is a really terrible idea and has really incensed nations all over the world. So Donald Trump, is taking a loner's approach, my way or the highway, to the world. And the vision he's promoting really is that of an empire which is teetering at the brink and promoting the neoliberal order, which in fact is melting down. That is endless wars abroad, austerity and economic struggle here at home, a growing climate emergency, and an assault on democracy. His agenda will continue dismantling civil society as we know it, worsening the assault on working people, women, immigrants, people of color, the poor, disabled, the LGBTQ community, and our democracy itself.
Climate change. She said he didn't mention climate change. Everything he's saying is basically, pushing climate change forward on and on. Essentially, Earth is on a kamikaze mission. They want to blow up the fucking world. The hurricanes in Houston, the hurricanes in Puerto Rico. And then she mentioned something about the FDA. She mentioned the infrastructure. She wants to say that the infrastructure what he's trying to do is, the opposite. He's saying he's going to do the infrastructure, but his tax policy shredded state and local budgets and revenues and municipal bonds to where they don't get the funds that they need. Also, he's pushing to privatize water. He's our snake oil salesman, right? President Carnival Barker, President Snake Oil Salesman. He doesn't believe in infrastructure. He wants a bunch of natural gas lines and oil lines all over the place, and he wants privatized water. He don't that mentions that he didn't say a lot of words. He forgot to mention equality. He forgot to mention peace. How come Donald Trump don't believe in peace? He don't believe in equality. He didn't mention justice, and he didn't mention poverty. Oops. Forgot to mention poverty, just like Saturday Night Live made fun of the Democrats. Can he just say progress? Did he even say progress? He didn't say equality, justice, peace, poverty. He did say nuclear arms. He did say lots more war. He did say Guantanamo Bay. He's going to keep Guantanamo Bay open so we can torture more and more. He's drone striking the shit out of everybody. He's given the CIA, this secret covert intelligence agency, unlimited access to the drones and who they drone strike. And who's doing it? We don't know. Who dropped the first drone strike in Yemen? Nobody admits it. Nobody took credit for it. So I guess what? The ghost? Did the ghost do it around it? Must have been the ghost that does all the shit that...
I'm going to let Adamu speak to the issue of militarism, since he has been so powerfully focused on that. And in the interest of time, I'll just say, we are off the charts as an empire with 800 bases around the world, special ops in over 140 countries around the world, half of our budget now dedicated to the military, $5 trillion, that's $23,000 per American taxpayer spent on these endless wars on terror in the Middle East alone. It's outrageous what we've been paying to accomplish what? Failed states, mass refugee migrations, and worse terrorist threats. What's happening now in Afghanistan is a real symbol of where this policy has led. In spite of these outrageous expenditures, over 1 million people killed in Iraq alone, tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers killed and wounded. We're back where we started, essentially, in Afghanistan. More of the same is not going to fix it. We need a way forward based on diplomacy, international law, and human rights. The flip side of militarism is the incredible austerity here at home, with 75% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck now, 43 million students in student debt.
It's here that Jill Stein was arrested resupplying the Winsboro Blee tree blockade in Texas. So there's a tree blockade, and she went and got them some food and water, got arrested for it. She cares about the environment. She's willing to stick her neck out. She's willing to do some MLK kind of shit. Sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, and you got to take your licks, right? She was locked. They did lock her up for going to that debate, put handcuffs on her. Here it says she was arrested, so she must have went to jail, right? Locked her up, put her on the seat, says stay right here in a room, took away her freedom because she cares about the trees and cares about the health of the people. And then, she spray painted. There was a warrant for her arrest for the Dakota Access Pipeline. So she is very much the exact opposite of Donald Trump. He wants more oil and natural gas pipelines, just like Hillary wants all the fracking, whereas Jill Stein actually wants this.
For which there is really no hope of ending, because the jobs that are coming back, and yes, indeed, there are jobs, but 95% of the jobs that have been created since the so-called recovery are low-wage, part-time, insecure, and temporary jobs. 95% of the wealth created in the last year has gone to the 1%, 0% of that wealth, and these are global figures, 0% of the wealth created in the last year has gone to the lower 50%. So Donald Trump can feed you his cherry-picked numbers, but they're not going to do it for us. I'm going to just briefly mention a couple things. We need transformative change. We need real policies that speak to the crises that we face. We are calling in the green agenda, we're calling for a Green New Deal.
We talk about escalating the nuclear arms race, so we're going to spend trillions of dollars on nuclear weapons, which is what Obama started. He pushed for $1.5 trillion for nuclear weapons. Kissinger says, A-OK, go ahead and drop the bomb on North Korea. So Donald Trump is, antagonizing. Can't wait for Kim Jong-un to fuck up and drop a nuke, and then we get to nuke a whole fucking nation, right? No telling the radiation fallout. Probably all of our Olympians will get radiation poison if we do what Kissinger says. But let's be honest, Hillary loved Kissinger, so does Donald. I mean, this is a two-party consensus for war and empire debt destruction. So that's what she said about Donald Trump's vision. His State of the Union was a distressing, dystopian vision of perpetual war and nuclear war, apocalyptic war. So a dystopian vision. We're going to continue with our militarism. We're going to continue, invading nations. We've already got 30
creating 20 million good wage jobs that will address right now on an emergency basis the crisis of the economy and the crisis of the climate. It will jumpstart the economy with the good jobs focused on sustainable and green energy, food, and transportation. It will jumpstart the economy. It will turn the tide on climate change. And guess what? It makes the friggin' wars for oil obsolete at the same time that it also massively reduces our health costs, which are a huge, it's like 20% of our GDP is being spent on health while we are getting sicker because we have such an outrageous, wasteful healthcare system, and because we are making people sick. I shouldn't say we, I mean the fossil fuels that Donald Trump has been praising as the beautiful, clean coal, etc. Coal is the dirtiest among them. These are the fossil fuels that are making us sick and sicker while they bankrupt us. So by moving to the green economy, and we call for doing that, by the year 2030, a truly emergency program, an emergency mobilization.
When it comes to foreign policy, it's the best thing Jill Stein talks about. She is wildly consistent. She is against the war. She don't believe in murder, and apparently she's one of the few. Only 1% of the nation who voted for Jill Stein also don't believe in murder, but the majority of the country doesn't mind if Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton kills whoever the fuck they want to kill. Use the military, use, the whatever, CIA, the Army, the Marines, the Air Force, the Coast Guard. Use whatever, means disposable to kill anybody that you want to. There are some people that's in favor of peace. Jill Stein is. So he didn't mention peace, poverty, equality, justice, didn't mention sexual assault. He did mention, Guantanamo Bay. So we're going to continue to torture more people, create more terrorists. We're going to continue the drone program. We're going to continue bombing innocents. We're going to continue creating more terrorists. We're going to carry on the war on terror because we want terrorism. We want terrorists. We want terrorists all over the place. That's why in human rights abuses, that's what Guantanamo Bay is. It's a secret military base that we can, if we capture somebody in Gabon, Africa, in the country of Gabon, we can capture them, and then we can put them in Guantanamo Bay. And then we don't have to try them. Why did you pick this person up? Well, I thought he was Al-Qaeda. No questions asked. All right, bring him on in. Without a trial, that's America, right? So without a trial, without the three branches of government, it's just fascism. So fascism has been unleashed all over the world. And then she also points out that the empire is teetering on the brink. This is a failing empire. Of course they got to accelerate. Of course they got to do military parades. There's 800 military bases all over the world. 150 of the countries have special ops. So we got our special ops people, 30 shadow wars in Africa. This was the most bloody, last year was the most bloody year for the Afghanistan invasion, for the Afghanistan.
That basically pays for itself. It's a win-win. At the same time, we call for healthcare and education as human rights. They also pay for themselves. We know that higher education pays back 7 times over the cost, and we know that from the GI Bill following the Second World War. The same is true for healthcare. We need to redistribute the cost, but essentially it's the same cost. That cost should be borne by those who can most afford it. I should also mention that Donald Trump's tax plan, he talks about how great it's going to be for working people. Well, unfortunately, those benefits for middle class and working people, those benefits last for about a couple of years, but then they phase out. On the other hand, the massive benefits, and over 80% of the $1.5 trillion worth of giveaways here. It all goes to the top 5% or so. And those benefits don't go away. It's the benefits for everyday people that go away. So we need a just tax structure that asks those who are most...
War on terror, the Afghanistan war, is our most favorite war of all time. We love the Afghanistan war more than we love the American Revolution, the Civil War, World War II, and World War I, all combined. World War II is 4 years. Civil War is 4 years. Revolutionary War is 7 years. So that's 15 years. We've been going since 2001. So that's 17 years. And then World War I. That's 1.5 years. So the war on terror is going on longer than the American Revolution, World War I, World War II, and the Civil War combined. We love our war. We love our war. It cost us $23,000 per person. $23,000. Hey, America, I got an idea. Why don't we start a long, forever war where we never stop? Everybody just throw in $23,000, you know, and I'll bomb and kill whoever y'all want me to. Just give me 20. Well, you're doing it anyways.
Benefited by the system to pay back their fair share. In doing so, we can provide health care and education and transportation. We need to end the deportation and create a welcoming path to citizenship. Donald Trump's speech was extremely divisive and played on racist notions of immigrants as the source of gang violence. Actually, that gang violence south of the border came from the U.S. in people who are deported. And it's also promoted by the endless drug wars related to the U.S. Drug policy, to prohibition, which should be ended. We should legalize marijuana and treat other drugs as health and public health issues, not as criminal issues. That would go a long way to stop the violence around drugs on both sides of the border, which can only be blamed really on U.S. drug policy. Immigrants are among the most productive and peaceful communities in the United States. And it's an outrage for Donald Trump to have mischaracterized
She talked about the student debt and how that's going to, then she talks about the new jobs that are being created aren't even good jobs. They're part-time shit jobs. They're insecure shit jobs. How all the new wealth is going to the 1%. The wages, the people aren't getting any of the new wealth that's being created. She's calling for a Green New Deal. She knows that when you invest in the people that you get a good return. Look at the GI Bill. So, you know, Jill Stein's amazing. Jill Stein is awesome. She's a precious revolutionary. She just talks to us plainly, like a regular person. And then she's not like a petulant child that needs everybody to clap at every single point that she makes. I remember Bernie Sanders and the Black Lives Matter, man, they shut Bernie Sanders down, didn't they?
Because what we've heard basically is an incredible fake news dump that is intended to keep us dispirited and keep us downhearted, because if we are hopeless, then we are powerless. But on the flip side of that, if we recognize our power, then we have very much to be hopeful for and to actually insist upon.
Sanders had begun his speech, and he says, I'm going to get you all universal health care, and only a couple people clapped. And he says, I'm going to get you universal college, and then he's kind of like, universal college, don't you all like that? So he was kind of, you know, clap for the things you like, clap for the ideas that you like. But I don't have to clap. I don't have to clap for anything. I'm there to listen. You're telling me, you know, you're passing a message along, and I'm there to listen to the message. You want me to clap at every single sentence? And Carrie Kennedy is like this. The way she speaks, every single sentence has to end on an applause line. So we have to agree on every single thing. She's like, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. But maybe that's, you know, we like that kind of bullshit. I appreciate the people who just level with me and just talk to me directly, talk to me straight. And Jill Stein is still, she didn't have to, why is she, you know, she don't have to speak up against the injustices, but my guess, being a revolutionary, it just doesn't sit well with her. She's got to do something.
If these climate policies are allowed to continue. One last thing I'm going to mention before passing the baton to Janu, and that is we also need ranked choice voting, because the politics of fear is used to intimidate voters into voting for the lesser evil. But we've seen over and over again that the lesser evil just paves the way for the greater evil. In many ways, Donald Trump is a symbol of that. Most people who voted for Trump were not voting for him. They were voting against Hillary Clinton, the Democrats, and the legacy of betrayal, of NAFTA, of exporting our jobs, of throwing workers under the bus. People are voting against that, the legacy of both the lesser evil and the greater evil. We need to lead the way forward. We need to be able to go into the polls and vote for what we want, not against the candidate we most dislike. Democracy needs a moral compass. We need to be that moral compass. Ranked choice voting allows us to actually bring our values to our votes and to let our vision drive the way forward. In a party that is in trouble, actually both parties are in trouble, but the Republicans more so, and at a time when people are clamoring for other political representation.